gonna cover that.
Yeah. We've noticed that 3 of us shop at the same store in shirts. Not 3 of us here, but in the meeting. Brandon.
Bill, Scott.
Where can you get a sweet shirt like that?
I think so. For budget amendments?
He's particularly serious today. I'm impressed. I missed the whole wrong suit. I thought about that for 6 seconds.
There's a lot of money involved, so I thought I'd better start stepping up. Broke the $100 million barrier. I thought that deserved a seat. Well, they adopted jeans, t-shirt,
Black tie. When they adopt, it's a black tie. Rex Spacers, tie my tie.
Brandon's not here.
Typically, unless he's got a specific presentation, he doesn't come to the council meeting.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was just
do you-
hoping to catch him for some.
Do you have his office number?
Yeah, I do.
or-
I've tried a few times, but haven't caught him over the last little bit. So
Well, I can make sure and let him know, though, that you...
I'll just try and get at him this week. But
Okay.
prayer and pledges. There's scouts here, though.
CDBG. Sometimes it's didn't mean it was long. It's just expressions.
Oh man, you clean up for this, don't you?
I'm feeling bad.
Hey, we're over $100 million. I thought that deserved a suit.
For the final adoption, it's black tie.
Oh, I gotta hear this stuff twice. Is that what you're telling me?
We gotta make it.
Can you make sure the camera isn't faced on me when I take a nap?
What are you saying?
The HDMI. Do you have it?
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to welcome you to our City Council meeting this evening. It's great to have you all here. My name is Mark Seastrand. I'm the Mayor Pro Tem. Mayor Brunst has another engagement until about a half hour or so. I believe he'll be joining us. So we'll look forward to his return, and then he can take over and run this meeting, unless we get done really fast, and then we'll surprise him. So thank you again for being here. We have inspirational thought or prayer by John Reinhardt, and then following John, we'll have a Pledge of Allegiance by Russ Snedden. If that will work, go ahead, John.
Our Heavenly Father, we, as the people in the city of Orem, are grateful for the many blessings that we share as a community. We ask Thee that during this meeting, our minds will be open to the things that are important for our community, and that during the discussion of monies, grants, and budgets, that needs will be met as much as possible. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Please stand and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Russ. We have had a chance to review the minutes of our City Council meeting from April 12th, 2016. Are there any additions or modifications or a motion to accept?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have
Second.
Second by Tom. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Call your attention to some upcoming events. It seems like there's a lot going on in the next little bit. So tomorrow night, 11 o'clock, or tomorrow night, May 11th at 7 o'clock, we'll be doing some Miss Orem interviews with the City Council. We ask them questions. They answer those questions as part of their preparation for the Miss Orem pageant. All are invited to attend. It is a fun event. On May 21st, we have the actual Miss Orem Scholarship Program, 7 o'clock. That'll be held at the Cirrus Center for the Arts. Also, I believe you can buy tickets there, but we'd love to see a full house, and it's a fun event there as well. And then we have the Heritage Commission Memorial Day program, always a fantastic event at the cemetery on Memorial Day, May 30th, begins at 9 o'clock. And come and show your patriotic and respect for those who have passed on. And then June 7th to the 11th, we have the City of Orem will be having the Summerfest event. Jamie, would you like to add any additional comments on anything going on to special attention, or put you on the spot here?
Sorry, I don't have specific information relative to all the timing of all the events. However, I know that this year's Summerfest Committee has added an inspirational service. There have been an event scheduled at the Shell, a storytelling event. There's a car show that's scheduled at Sierra Park. And they've added one additional evening to the carnival activities that have typically been Friday and Saturday. They're now Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Pete, who was just here, has been working with the Summerfest Committee, and so he could probably speak better to all the timing of things, but I know that it's scheduled to be a much larger event than it has in years past.
And then we have special appearances by Jim Burdett.
Excuse me, yes. We also have the
Don't forget
the All-Together Shootout at Orem High School, and Stephen has been coordinating that. It's turning out to be a wonderful event. I think we're about, Stephen, about $76 a shot now that's been pledged to date.
Right.
So that's pretty good. We're pretty excited about it.
Okay. Thank you. So those are the key activities through the first part of June. We'll have another City Council meeting in May, and we'll update you with the rest of those. So thank you very much. A full event. Do we have any appointments to boards or commissions? I'm not aware of any. Okay. We have two proclamations we'd like to present tonight and get approved if possible. The first one is for Independence Week. I don't know, is there anyone here that is with the organization supporting and presenting the the proclamation? Okay, we've asked Debbie LeRae, Councilman LeRae, to go ahead and read the proclamation for us.
Whereas Independence Week provides a time to celebrate the independence of the members of the community of Orem and the entrepreneurial spirit represented by our core of local independent businesses, and whereas the individual decisions every community member makes today affect the future of Orem, and whereas Orem's local independent business help preserve the uniqueness of the community and give us a sense of place, and whereas Orem's core of independently owned businesses give back to this community in goods, services, time, and talent, and whereas the health of Orem's economy depends on our support of businesses owned by our family and friends, our friends and neighbors, and whereas Orem's independent business owners and employees enrich community members' shopping experiences with their knowledge and passion, and therefore, as we celebrate Independence Week 2016, we acknowledge that the ability to choose the direction of Orem lies within each of us. Now, therefore, I, Richard F. Brentz, Jr., Mayor of the City of Orem, Utah, do proclaim the week of July 1 through 7, 2016 as Independent Week in the City of Orem, and salute our community members and locally owned independent businesses who are integral to the unique flavor of Orem and honor their effects to make Orem the place we want to live and work. It is dated 10th day of May.
Very good. Do we have a recommendation to adopt the proclamation?
So moved.
Seconds?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Congratulations. There's a great independent business owners. Go. We need you. Okay, we also have a proclamation for Police Week coming up here this year, and I've asked Sam Lentz, Councilman Lentz, would you go ahead and take the effort on that?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, may we also invite Chief Gary Giles, who's
Yes.
our police chief, to join us here at the podium?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to tell us a little bit about this before we read?
I would love to tell you a little bit about it.
Thank you,
As most of you probably know, in fact, we're going to be reading about it. May 15th is nationally recognized as Law Enforcement Memorial Day. The week that contains May 15th is typically Police Week, or known as Police Week. Now, this year, being the 15th is on a Sunday, many of the activities back in Washington, D.C. are going to be taking place this week. We have chosen to also do the same. So technically, the 15th falling into next week, we are doing everything leading up until the 15th, with the 15th being Law Enforcement Memorial Day. So far this year, 35 officers in the nation have been killed in the line of duty. One of those being here in Utah, as some of you may have attended the funeral of Officer Doug Barney, who was buried in our cemetery here in Orem City. Many officers have given their lives over the years in the line of duty, protecting the public. Certainly the men and women of Orem City are among the best in the nation, and I can attest to you that you have the best police force anywhere out there, and that's not by any means because of my position. I love this department, I love this city, and I love this department and the men and women who work every single day out there. Certainly their job has not gotten any less dangerous over time. In fact, I would say that over the last few years, their job has become much more dangerous as they go out and try to protect us day in and day out. One thing that we tried to do a little bit different this year is that a committee that was put over our Police Week activities decided to recognize and memorialize some of the officers who are actually buried here in our Orem City Cemetery. I did not realize that we have 5 officers that have died in the line of duty over the years, as well as 8 other former Orem police officers who were buried in the cemetery. As I emailed all of you earlier in the day, the families of police officers on yesterday, went up and decorated the gravesite of all of these individuals. The 5 officers who have died in the line of duty being Doug Barney, Officer Joe Adams, whose brother is on our police force as well, Robert Hutchings, Fred House, and David Jones, all of who died in the line of duty and are buried in the Orem City Cemetery. Those Orem City police officers who have retired and since passed away are Gary McGiven, Norm Carter, Ron Allen, Jim Simmons, Fran Fillmore, Val Kilpack. We also memorialized 2 long-term dispatchers who spent their career here, one of which was also a retired New York officer, Kenny Holtz and Alan Fuchs. All of their grave sites are at the Orem Cemetery, and we'd like to memorialize them as well. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the more than 80 dedicated members of the City of Orem Police Department, and whereas nearly 60,000 assaults against law enforcement officers are reported each year, resulting in approximately 16,000 injuries, and whereas since the first recorded death in 1791, more than 20,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and been killed in the line of duty. And whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C., and whereas hundreds of new names of fallen heroes are being added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial this spring, including 128 officers killed in 2015 and many officers killed in previous years, and whereas May 15th of each year is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families, and U.S. flags should be flown at half-staff. Now, therefore, I, Richard F. Bruntz Jr., Mayor of the City of Orem, Utah, do hereby proclaim May 9th through 15th, 2016, as Police Week in the City of Orem, and publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation. We urge all citizens to salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation. Dated this 10th day of May, 2016.
Excellent.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if you wouldn't mind, one more thing that I forgot to mention as well. One of the things that we often see that has become a symbol of the officers who have died in the line of duty is a thin blue line. The thin blue line has become, I guess, a tradition in a sense, because that thin blue line is what protects us from the good from evil. We actually have on all of our patches at the very top, we actually have a thin blue line in a memorial, in a sense, to those officers who have given their lives in the line of duty as well. As you'll notice also, if you look at our new cars, our new design, you'll see underneath the City of Orem, there is actually a thin blue line with black on top and black on the bottom. And that also is to memorialize all of those officers who have given their lives in the line of duty as well.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
We do so appreciate that, and we appreciate the effort you, Chief Giles, do, as well as all of our officers. I have always been treated with great respect and courtesy and professionalism, both before I was on the council as well as since. I am very proud of our police officers, our police force, and the brave men and women who serve this community, and we take our hat off to you and thank you for your tireless service and tremendous job that you do.
Thank you very much. I'm proud of them as well.
Do we have a motion to approve the proclamation?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. Thank you very much. We now have on the agenda the report from the Heritage Advisory Commission. We'd like to invite them to come on up and give us their report.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I along with Christy Snyder, work with the Heritage Advisory Commission, and will present to you Russ Sneddon here. He was recently voted by the commission to be the chair of this advisory commission, but I just always have to say that this body isn't just a sort of deliberation and recommending type body. They actually do roll up their sleeves and put in a lot of service hours to make sure that logistical details associated with the Memorial Day program and the Veterans Day program are such successful events for us. So with that, turn the time over to Russ.
Thanks, Brandon. Brandon is an integral part of our committee, is part of the city support staff. So we have Brandon from the Assistant City Manager's Office, Christy Snyder, who also assists us with keeping the minutes and keeping us between the lines in our activities, and she does a great job with that. And Dan Barrett from the city cemetery, our sexton up there, who's not here today, but he's very actively involved in making sure that the cemetery is prepared not just for Memorial Day, but he takes on that additional burden of preparing the memorial and the statue and the flags and everything else that go along with that memorial on both Memorial Day and Veterans Day, so he needs to be recognized for that. He's currently on some medical leave, and we have somebody from the Public Works that's been helping him out. And Chris is here, and I apologize. I can't remember if it's Kevin or not that's helping us out up at the cemetery. I talked to him earlier in the week, but they've stepped up. Public Works has stepped up to help out while Dan's on leave. The Heritage Commission, as I'm sure you're aware, Councilmember C-Strand, is operating under the commission of the City Council. It was placed in from under an Orem City article back in 2002. We have a council member from the City Council that assists us and guides us. That's Councilmember Debbie LeRae. She's been very involved since her assignment with the City Council, and we're happy to have her there to help us out. The Heritage Commission consists of 7 appointed members. They're appointed by the mayor and the City Council. There's myself. I don't know if any of the others have been able to come in this afternoon or not. They were invited. Kelly Kirkpatrick, Jeff Olson, Norman Tong, Niles Elwood, Mike Walker, and Brad Prescott. All of whom serve. They're all members of Orem City. That's one of the requirements. All of them serve for a 4-year term. The commission acts in an advisory capacity of the City Council. We've been tasked with developing memorials to honor veterans specifically and to foster a local tradition of formally celebrating our heritage through Memorial Day, Independence Day, and Veterans Day celebrations. So we have a semi-annual event on Memorial Day and Veterans Day up at the City Cemetery. It's there by the Veterans statue. It's very well attended, numbers in the several hundreds. They all over the lawn, through the parking lot, and out through the cemetery. It's a phenomenal thing. And as I'm looking at the faces, I think I've seen most of you there through the years. It's a great opportunity to come out, and our families also. We also support Independence Day through the Summer's Day Festival. This year we're planning on having at least one vintage vehicle. Kelly Kirkpatrick is arranging that. He's a great liaison with some of our older veterans, and we'll be participating in the parade with that. And Councilmember LeRae is also invited to represent on that if she'd like. We also have been tasked with establishing flag raising ceremonies and conducting educational outreach to enhance appreciation for the nation and the sacrifices on its behalf. So we appreciate that. Again, we operate as an advisory capacity to the council. One of the things that we've got coming up, as you mentioned, is the Memorial Day activity. Here's our proposed brochure pamphlet of the schedule. Will be finalized tomorrow night at our Heritage Commission meeting. We're required to meet quarterly. We do meet that requirement, but we meet much more frequently in the couple of months preceding these events. So we'll meet again tomorrow night. It is a public meeting. Anyone is welcome to come. We do maintain the minutes, and they're available. It's normally in the conference room that's just off the kitchen at 5:30 tomorrow night. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions, Council? Do you want to say comment, Debbie?
Well, I've only been on this commission since January, but I have to say these veterans, I assume all of them have served, are some of the finest individuals I've ever met, and they are dedicated to the city as well as our country, and they deserve our honor and whatever we can do to honor them. And so I'd encourage people to come to the Memorial Day program. It's going to be outstanding. I know there's several. I know there was a nurse and a gentleman that were they in their 90s, 80s, 90s, and these are people that have served, and we're going to be hearing from them. So it's a great thing to bring your families out, and I'm excited to be part of this great patriotic commission.
Thank you, Debbie. As you said, it's an honor to be involved with it and to see the number of people in our community. We definitely have that citizen warrior mentality in our community. In our community, there's an extremely large number of past and present service members that come out and support us, as well as that are interned in our cemetery. So thank you for letting us be a part of it.
It's been a great event, and I do appreciate everything that's been done there. How many individuals do we recognize with the flags on Veterans Day and on Memorial Day?
Oh, I wish Kelly were here. He'd be able to tell you the exact number. I know it's
quite
in
a
the
few.
hundreds.
Yeah.
And they have some community groups that come out and help them with that, and they kind of rotate that through. And speaking of our community groups, we have a band that comes out, a community band, not just one high school, but John Bowman from Timpanogos High School, he puts together a community band that comes out there, over 50 people to come out and represent with that. Veterans of Foreign Wars comes out. ROTC from BYU comes out and does a silent drill. It's just it's a nice thing to come out and be a part of it. It takes about an hour and a half, and rain or shine, we're out there and
That's right.
most of the community.
And there's been some of both, rain and shine.
We've had both. Yeah.
And we still have a few World War II veterans that are still with us in the city. That's always fantastic, and just a great group of veterans and people to honor and celebrate. So thank you very much. Quick question from
Sorry,
Mr.
Russ, before you go, thank you so much for agreeing to serve as the chair to that commission as well. I just had one quick question with the new Veterans Center that they have down at UVU. I'm curious if you guys have had any chance to kind of collaborate and see if there are ways that we can kind of extend an olive branch from the community out to UVU and vice versa. And it's a relatively new center, so.
It is. There's some phenomenal things. Thank you for mentioning that, Councilmember Lentz. There's some phenomenal things going on in our area. This year, UVU's got the new Veterans Center Memorial that they've got going down there. One of the things that's coming up on the 21st of May, just a couple Saturdays, the 405th CA Civil Affairs Battalion that's in Pleasant Grove. They'll be having a veterans event including a 5K run. They'll have a Medal of Honor winner that from recent conflict in Afghanistan that will be representing there. Ty Carter out of the 361 Cav. Just some phenomenal things that are going on in the community. We're kind of really tasked heavily accomplishing the things that we're doing currently. So we stay aware of and we try to share some of the things that are going on, but we're kind of narrowing our focus to those specific events that we're chartered on.
Thank you, Russ.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Okay, next we have time set aside for personal appearances. I don't know if we had any that signed up on the list.
We actually do not have anybody that signed up.
Okay, then we will move right on to our scheduled item, number 14, a public hearing on this Community Development Block Grant Awards for 2016-27. Mr. Stephen Downs will be our presenter.
Mayor and Council, this is the same presentation that you have received back in the end of March. And again, per HUD requirements, we have to present it, have a 30-day comment period where people can write in any type of comment. During that time, we didn't have any comment given. And so I'm here today to recommend adoption of the Community Development Block Grant allocation as we'll present. None of our commission members could make it tonight. Our chair, Jenny, who typically would be with me, was not able to be in attendance. I trust that some of them are at home, glued to their TV watching this. But if not, we appreciate all that they've done. Jenny Ball, Braden Santo, Vicki Johnson, Chris Bennett, Greg Brown, and Tom Walsh spent 4 different nights, 2.5 to 3 hours each night, hearing from the different organizations and what they do. Some of them spent time down at the organizations, touring the facilities, understanding better what they do, hearing from people that utilize their services. And I think all made comments of how grateful they are for these services in our community, that those that are maybe the most vulnerable have opportunities to be served with such critical services. So as is always the case, their only regret is that they couldn't do more. As we prepared for this year, we did do a survey. It was done in-house, so it isn't, of course, a scientific survey, but it did give some clear recommendations from about 130 participants in the survey of what the priorities are for public services. And per HUD requirements of the entitlement amount, which is about $608,000, 15% can go to public services, but that is the cap. And so as we asked what funding priorities were most important, educational, substance abuse, domestic violence services, mental health, and healthcare were the ones that rose to the top, and that is reflected in the allocation for the coming year. We also talked about public infrastructure. There will be $150,000 allocated to that. Sidewalk and street improvements were the top, water and sewer, and drainage. Again, these things can only be done in qualifying neighborhoods. We also have about survey data as far as housing goes, and we don't allocate any of our money to housing. We do serve on a home consortium with other in Utah County where we do allocate to home projects that help people get into homes through home ownership, emergency repair, which we do participate in emergency repair. We'll talk about that, and home improvement assistance. So as we get into the recommendation, again, appreciate all those that spent any time and the amount of time they did preparing their presentation, giving the presentation, answering the questions. We're grateful for that, but more importantly, we're grateful for what they do for the members of our community. While most of these serve people outside of our community, our funding is only given for the service that they give to members of our community.
Mayor Pro Tem, may I ask a
Yes, please, Rickman.
Steve, how do they go about getting their name on this list, and where does the money come from? Would you give that kind of backdrop to not only the city council, those in the audience who might have that question?
As an entitlement community, and that is a community in the United States of over 50,000, there's federal money that's given to those communities to service low and moderate income families for these types of services. And so that's where the money comes from, and then also program income. So in some cases, we have housing rehabilitation loans, and as those get paid off, that money gets rolled back into the services that we provide. So program income, which is really the loan payments coming back, and then also the entitlement money, which has been about the $608,000, $609,000 over the last couple of years.
Do we apply for that, or is it?
No, as an entitlement community, we are given that, and there's a formula, and it's based on the size of the community, but also the census data as to how many low and moderate income families are in our community. Okay. So between those two.
And then how do these organizations get there?
Yep. So we put public notices out so that so that they can learn about it through different types of notices. And then obviously most of these, because they do the same thing in other communities, so that they can service people in Provo, they apply for the program in Provo. So most of these types of services, they know it's there. They've applied for it year after year. But we'll always get, every now and again, we'll get a couple new ones. This year, the Rocky Mountain University of Health Professionals were new ones, and they'll usually find out from some type of notice that's out in the community. Thanks. Good, great question. And I will say the one other that did apply this year was the Experience Children's Museum. They applied for $100,000. This would be a children's museum, much like they have one in St. George. There's a children's museum. It's the same operator. They want to build one and asked for $100,000 of seed money based on the location they were looking to go, which was at University Place. It didn't fit the criteria of this. While it's a great project, it's admirable. We didn't want to first be the seed money. We want to help support ones that are up and running. We don't want to necessarily be kind of the seed money for an entrepreneur. While we feel like, again, it would service. So we actually had a good conversation with HUD to find out if this is something that would qualify. And their recommendation was, when this gets up and going, you can look to fund programs that benefit the low and moderate income in your community. But to fund the capital means that the amount of people that come in, so everybody that would come into that museum would have to be checked for income and all that, and that gets really difficult in a mall-type setting to ask every person coming through the door for income. And this organization wasn't really prepared to go to that extent, understandably so. So we didn't recommend any funding, while we would love to have it in our community. The Community Action Services and Food Bank, $16,000. Utah County 4-H After School, $1,000. Friends of the Food and Care Coalition, $7,000. Rocky Mountain University of Health Professionals, $4,000. Mountain Lands Community Health Center, $4,500. Family Support and Treatment Center, $11,000. Kids on the Move, $5,000. Center for Women and Children in Crisis, $8,295. Community Health Connect, $4,000. People Helping People, $4,500. Project Read, $3,000. Orem Literacy Center, $2,000. Raw Recreation Rehabilitation Services, $7,000. PERC, the Parent Education Resource Center, $2,000. Friends of Utah County Children's Justice Center, $12,000, which totals $91,295, which is 15% of our entitlement funding for the upcoming year. And we have received that amount from HUD. So this is based on what we actually will receive. There is a process of working with each of these organizations throughout the year, monitoring them to check that they are verifying income on those that they serve and that those people that are receiving any funding from this meet the qualifications. So we do meet with these organizations once a year, and they file reports at end of year. And before they draw down any money from us, we've checked to see that they're meeting the intent of the money. Above and beyond the public services, we also fund infrastructure or more capital type facilities. The big change that will happen this year, in the past, we've done a housing rehabilitation program in-house, and we've used consultants to do environmental reviews, manage contractors, go out to bid for housing rehab. And this is roof projects, this is heating and ventilation projects, this is bathroom restorations for unsuitable living conditions. We made a decision this year with the help of Charlene, obviously helping facilitate this with Habitat for Humanity as she was in this position for a while, to outsource this entire program to Habitat for Humanity. There was really two reasons for that. One, it allows us to focus on public facilities and making some of these sidewalk improvements that are necessary in neighborhoods. The second is that Habitat has a huge volunteer force that they can take the money and go much further than we can. We just bid it out, hire contractors, and pay the contractors. Habitat rallies volunteers, pays what they have to pay, but could take $5,000 and maybe make it go 3-4 times as far as we can. And they have the ability in-house to do all the environmental reviews. So we feel like this is the right direction to go.
Are those projects primarily in Orem then?
All in Orem. They do others outside of the community, but we will only fund those.
For this funding, it is
that are in the community. And then the loan payments will now be coming back to them so that they can continue to reinvest it in their program. One of the things with Habitat is they traditionally have built homes for low-income families. The cost of land in Orem has made it more difficult as the years have gone on to be able to afford the property to purchase and build the home. And so they've really continued to diversify their mission by going into houses that are existing and rehabilitating them to make them suitable for families that are currently living in there. They're just not living in suitable conditions that we would find suitable for our children and for their children. And so the amount has an asterisk, and that is because at the end of the year, we're not sure how much money we'll have. We may have a project that comes up in the next couple months that we'll fund, and that would be reduced from the $229,000. But whatever we have left in kind of the pot of money will just be over to Habitat for them to take the program over. Code enforcement, $130,000. Public facilities, these are the sidewalk and street type improvements, $150,000. Administration, which is the ability to run the program, $103,000, and a Section 108 loan payment that was committed a few years ago, $105,000. So that totals $808,636. That includes the new entitlement money, program income that we received last year, plus that we anticipate over the coming year. And then also the money that hasn't been spent that would be rolled over to a program for Habitat for Humanity. Any questions?
Thank you. Go ahead.
One question on, if you want to go back one slide to I'm excited about the Habitat for Humanity partnership that we have, and I have every confidence that is going to be a great way to go further with that funding. I'm just curious, is there a process in place for them to come back and report on, here's what we're able to get done with that? Is it similar to what we had in place with the contractors before, just so that we can actually demonstrate next year as we're having these conversations, this is the decision we made, here's what we're able to, how we benefited from it?
Yeah, so they would report always in all cases to our Community Development Block Grant Citizen Advisory Commission as they're applying for more funding next year. But because of the size and what they're taking over, there would be an opportunity that we could definitely have them come in and talk more about the projects and show pictures and what kind of changes they made. And that's stuff that's always been documented by Kenyon Consulting is who we use, and then turned over to us. But yeah, we can definitely get more information on the specific projects they're doing.
Great, thank you.
Do we provide Habitat for Humanity any priorities or any projects that the city deems to be on the list, or do we allow them to just make those decisions?
Yeah, they have a board that they go to for the decisions, and so what happens is citizens, and often they know about it, they'll apply for it based on the need, and they have critical services that they'll look to always fund first. But they have a board that they'll go back to and before they move forward with any project and move forward. But we do rely on them, and one of the reasons we did it is we spent a lot of time going back and forth with our consultant on should we do this, shouldn't we do that, and they always have to kind of come back and forth, and it ends up taking quite a bit of time and inspections that will go out to the home, and we feel like Habitat can do that more efficiently than we can, and avoids really the middleman of the consultant.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Debbie? Okay, this is a public hearing, so we will open the comments now from the public to be able to come up and share their thoughts, and we have a 3-minute limit, so here comes Charlene.
I only need 1 minute. Charlene Crozier, 637 South, 1870 West. I am a city employee, but tonight I'm here to speak in favor of the work that the Community Development Block Grant Committee did, because it's a long process and they've done a great job, and I appreciate the committee and the people who serve in these organizations. But I happen to sit on the Habitat Rehabilitation Committee, and we do have an excellent process in place that looks at all different factors, whether it's income, the people who live in the home, their needs. And I think this is a great move because it puts it in the right place for citizens to access kind of one-stop shop. And I think Habitat has a mission to continue to grow their scope, whether it's through seeking additional grants, things like Green Healthy Homes to address conditions of asthma and other challenges different to living conditions, but it's in the very best hands. They have an incredible organizer in Eric Jorgensen. His history is with the Housing Authority of Utah County, and he is now with Habitat, and he just does a great job, and they really can make this funding go a long way with his expertise, and then, as Stephen noted, the volunteers. So I just really think it's a great move, and I appreciate your consideration of that.
Thank you. The mayor is now in charge of the meeting.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you taking charge of the meeting there.
Well, I'll start over if you'd like.
I'll start over now. So do we have any other public comments on the CDBG Awards? If not, we'll go ahead and close the public portion, comment portion of this hearing and bring it back to the council. Any comments from the council?
I'll make a comment.
Councilmember Seastrand.
I really appreciate the efforts that go into these projects. They are meaningful. They are important to the community. A lot of work, a lot of oversight. I think they are a significant benefit to our community. And I would be ready to make a motion to adopt the recommendation of the CDBG Citizens Advisory Committee as outlined before us.
And the Community Development Block Grant.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. Councilmember Luray?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Thank you.
That passes. We'll now go ahead and move on to resolution listed as item number 15, adopting the City of Orem fiscal year 2016-17 tentative budget. Thank you, Steve. We appreciate that. We'll now have Richard Manning and Brandon Nelson as our presenters.
Mayor, may I just make a comment in relation to Mr. Manning and Mr. Nelson's presentation tonight? As you know, today is the 10th of May. This is, in fact, the day that many of the bills that the Utah State Legislature adopted this last legislative session take effect. And we have had a change to the tentative budget process. And it has traditionally been something that the council just adopts by way of resolution. That will continue to be the course, but as part of this law change this year, there is actually a requirement to hold a public hearing as well as part of this effort.
Okay.
Now, in speaking with Mr. Stevens, he has noted that there's no specific noticing criteria that's included in the new law, and so as a result, it will be appropriate for us to just open it up as a public hearing and to accept public comment. But That's why my suggestion and recommendation to you is, as you, Mr. Manning concludes the presentation, if you would please open it up for a public hearing. That way we can comply with the law that actually takes effect today.
Okay, great.
Any added comments, Mr. Stevens? Thanks.
All right. We're ready to listen.
Okay, Mayor, members of the council, it's our pleasure to be here. Seems like we do this once a year.
You do.
And I'm sure as you got up this morning, you were just going,
Today's the day.
is the day. And you're so excited. Now, to help everyone keep focused, there are a few trivia questions that will be coming along during this presentation. And we have some prizes to the winners, and it's open to you. I want to all, our bazillions of people here. Unfortunately, the many watching online, we can't do it. But so the 5 or 6 there, I'm sorry, we just can't do it. So once a year we're here. The state code requires that we present this by the first meeting of May. And this kind of, if you will, opens up the budget season where now you have it. Feel free, dive in, do whatever you need to. Any questions, come up and ask us. We have crossed a threshold this year for the first time of being 100 million. And it's been incrementally creeping up, but we just barely crossed that threshold this year. There's no real significance to it, but it's just where we are.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. Now, what we've done so far, if you recall, February 5th with the council retreat, we met together, and it was actually a very good discussion where we talked about the high-level issues coming up with the city and how to address them from a budgeting point of view. Then February 23rd, we had a work session that focused on revenue projections for the year along with the compensation recommendations. March 22nd, we hit operational, CIP, fleet, and information technology issues. And then on the 12th, we discussed the enterprise funds. The basis of it all is, okay, what kind of economy do we think we're going to have coming in? Utah County, the unemployment is very low. It's 3.4%. The nation's at 5%. Utah County wages year over year are up 5.6%, which is what you would expect to see with that low of unemployment. And Utah has been noted for having the best business climate in the nation. We expect, even though if you look at particularly the international outlook for the economy, there are a lot of things that could say, hey, we're heading into some sort of a slowdown. Utah is a very broad-based economy. If we do have one, we think we will get through this year before we start to see the impacts. Cities are slow to feel the impacts of a recession, and likewise are slow to feel the recoveries. But we think coming into fiscal 17, it's based on a strong economy. The budget highlights, there are no tax increases proposed in this budget. There are several new positions that we'll go over each one of these. There are some operations expansion requests that will help us be a little bit more efficient in how we do things. There are a number of strategic studies that, though not part of the funding in this, will change the way the city operates down the road for the foreseeable future. So we're going to go over those a little bit. There's the fleet replacement that we have to do every year. There's a certain number of capital projects. I think of note is the Jordanelle payment. We've had roughly a 25-cent on the water base rate for 3/4-inch meters each year since the late 90s. And this is the last one of these. Then the amount of money we pay for Jordanelle stays intact until the year 2047. At that time, the city will have renegotiated with the Provo River water users and come up with a new, whatever the payments need to be. I'm sure Brandon will be there for 2047. If I'm alive then, I might come to the public hearing. Okay, this word cloud that's coming up, this shows proportionally the importance of the various revenue sources. Sales tax is our largest single source of revenue that we receive in the city. Water's next, but the utilities combined are very important to us, and the water, sewer, stormwater, streetlights, they operate as little mini businesses, and they are self-supporting. Not so much streetlight, but in theory, yeah. But the other utilities are self-supporting in it. And then our fees, et cetera, make up smaller parts of the pie. Now, the top 10 departments and how it goes in way of earning is Public Works is a third of the budget. Non-departmental, that's for the big thing there is the Utopia payment is in there, and a lot of other things that they don't really belong to any single department. That's a significant chunk of money. Police are 13%. Administrative services, us, that's 11%. We also pick up and are custodians of all the debt that gets paid, and that's why that boosts it up. Fire is 8%. City manager is 4.1%. There's a lot more there besides the city manager. It's a fairly decent-sized operation with that does quite a lot of things. Library is 3.4. Recreation is almost 3. Legal barely tops 1, although their contribution to us is it's immeasurable.
It's at least 1.2%. Sorry.
He'll pay me later. And I'm sorry, guys, 0.5% is what's allocated to you.
That's too much.
Okay, overall, this is how the money's come in. You see over 3 years running of the $100 million new ongoing revenue represent just under $84 million. We have transfers between the various funds of little over $16.5 million. I think this is significant that in this budget, we're only appropriating $50,000 of surplus, and that was to take one fund and kind of use up surplus that they don't need.
Can I? Sorry, finish your comment, and then I'll comment.
Go ahead.
I think this is the interesting thing about the budgeting process. When you mentioned earlier that we're a $100 million budget, I mean, the transfers really make up a significant portion, which are just moving from one cause to the other.
Yeah.
But the real number really is the revenues is the key aspect that's an indication of where the city is in terms of their spending. Is that a fair statement?
That is, and that's the ongoing money. So you can see in the last 3 years, we've gone from almost 78.5 to almost 80.5 now to just under 84 million in ongoing revenues. And the transfers back and forth is we give a lot of services to other departments. For example, we have to buy the water we use to water the lawns here. And we pay each other for that. And that is a lot of the transfers. Or moving debt from, say, the streetlight budget over to where it gets paid in through the debt service fund. It's things like that. And that does make up, it's almost 17% of the budget, isn't it? But you have to show it that way.
Councilman McDonald has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you described earlier, you said Utopia was part of this kind of administrative group, but the Utopia payment isn't. It's 17. It's part of the 17% total, but for the record, it's about 3% of our total budget.
It's just barely cleared $3 million this year.
Okay, thank you.
And it goes up 2% a year.
Thank you.
One comment I wanted to make was that our sales tax is now hitting $20 million.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it.
Okay. And your franchise tax and your property tax are about $8 million apiece.
Yeah.
And your water fees, I think together about 24.
Well, water itself is 12.
Right, but I mean together with reclamation and so forth.
Haven't added them.
I'll look at it, but I think it's like 23, 24 million. So.
The general fund itself is the biggest part of the budget, and that's the kind of things people typically think of as a city. It's streets, it's parks, it's police, fire, ambulance, library. It's all in what's termed the general fund. And counting, how could I have forgotten that? Legal. And they are 52% of the total budget. So it comes up to 52 million, 46 of which is almost 47 is new money, ongoing money. It was mentioned earlier this evening about grants. That will be in the budget that we present, we only put in grant monies that we're really, really certain we're going to give or receive. But as we amend the budget quarterly throughout the year, we will add grants in as we receive them for this reason. If you approve a budget of $100 million, and let's say 10 million of that is grants, we don't get all 10 million, say we only get 5, you have approved spending authority of an additional 5 million for which there is no revenue because we didn't receive the grant. So we don't approve those, so we can't spend the money. And they don't come in large chunks. They can be fairly small, but we want to make sure money will come in before money is authorized to go out. It's just a built-in protection to keep us out of trouble. As you can see here, if 10% of the general fund is in transfers, money going back and forth, and a lot of that is services that we render from the general fund to the enterprise funds. Now, in the general fund itself, property tax and this area up here of taxes is 66% of the general fund. Of that 66%, property tax in all of its components makes up 12, franchise tax 15, and sales tax, again, the importance of it is 38%. It's a highly volatile revenue source, and it goes up and down with the economy, and because of that, it's something we have to watch very, very carefully. Now, sales tax, Mayor, you mentioned we project we'll hit 20 million. Fiscal 15, we ended up at 18.8, and we're headed to 19.4 this year, and we think that we'll make 20 million. And this is one that we do underestimate some because this is operating budget going against this, and we don't want to have to make those kind of cuts in the time frame we would have to do it. You never really know how you end up with sales tax until 2 months after the fiscal year has closed. But so it's something we have to watch very carefully. Our sales tax rate for a city is 6.85%. Now, with property tax, we are very, very shy, if you will, on having increases, or not increases, but projecting the growth factor. And we want to wait because we will not know how we're going to do with property tax or what the rate's going to be and what it is projected to give us and what the growth will be, and usually until after you have adopted the final budget. They don't have, the county, is the county. They don't have to give it to us until June. And typically we have adopted a budget prior to receiving that number. So we've had some scary things where we overestimated and we had to make some quick cuts to make it all work out. And we don't want to do that. We'd rather say, hey, we just picked up $100,000. And that's a lot easier to deal with. So we always adopt the rate that's recommended unless you want to go through truth and taxation, no one wants to. This is our current combined rate, 1652. It's very low, very competitive in our area. If you take your home property tax bill, you're roughly 14.5% of the total bill is the city's portion. Franchise tax, it's very stable. It is somewhat impacted by the weather, because natural gas is a part of that, as is electricity. So a harsh winter or summer, you'll see the impact of it. One of the reasons it's staying very stable, in fact...
Go ahead and finish, and then I want to make a comment.
We have a declining number of telephone numbers because people are dropping landlines. So the part of the franchise tax is on a phone bill, and as the numbers of phone lines decline, that kind of keeps us a little, you would expect it to be going up, but it's fairly stable.
I was just going to say, going back to the property tax, it is important to note what you said. It's 14 point whatever percent comes to the city. The reality is 85% of the property tax we pay goes to the other 4 taxing entities. We only get a sliver. So
yeah, although we seem to get the
We get the brunt, of the
people's ire.
problems and people's ire, but the reality is our portion's very small.
Fairly small, yes. For the utilities, it's a 6%. It's on, gas, power, water, sewer. Building fees, this is an area that we deliberately under budget, if you will. We know that our fees will probably exceed the 1.238 that we put in there. And you can see historically they have. But each building permit, typically, it's a one-time thing. There's enough building that goes on that we know what we will receive year over year. But the big fluctuations that we've seen, we'll count that as extra money, and we will budget it as a capital project in a subsequent year. But we don't want to build an operating budget on this because we know sooner or later it goes away. So that's why it's deliberately underestimated. In here, we are putting in funding for a new building inspector that is proposed to be added to the budget. Okay, a growing part of our budget is we provide police services, which we have for a number of years, to the Alpine School District, in-school officers, and we provide fire and ambulance for Vineyard and Linden. And as those communities grow, so do these contracts, and it's becoming fairly a significant amount of money at this point in time. Particularly with Vineyard, they're growing a lot more than we are. From that growth, we think Vineyard alone will go up to $330,000, and we're taking some $100,000 of this contract money, setting it aside for future fire services. As we need, we'll have an ongoing source of revenues built in the budget that's really not being appropriated for spending, but is ongoing. Okay, summing up the personnel requests, we have some new positions, a little over 660,000. Some new non-benefited positions are in there. There's a 3% wage increase for benefited employees, and that figure also includes the benefits that are impacted by wage hikes. Non-benefited wage increases in there. Total ongoing there of just under 1.5 million. The recommended new positions are an associate engineer. Now you see here you have a number in brackets. This position is one that payment for it comes out of several utilities along with the general fund. So the ongoing impact of the general fund is 15.4. And by the way, the number given here is the full cost. It's the benefits too. Building inspector is here. That all belongs to the general fund. And we have a lead mechanic. And again, it's shared. And you'll see as opposed to the associate engineer where a small amount of money stays with the general fund, the majority does here because the majority of the fleet is owned by the general fund. 3 new police officers are in there for a little over $250,000. A public works management analyst is in there. Again, this one is shared greatly with the enterprise funds, and a very small amount sticks with the general fund. And a new public works water technician entirely in the water fund. Okay, the non-benefited positions, we have an intern in human resources, a technician to help with the building growth that's going on in development services, a planning intern. They have a need for an attorney, and they pick attorney up that's traditionally a job where people come and go in it as they wait to land a full-time job being an attorney somewhere. And this last position will be one that will help with rollout of Utopia primarily and helping to maximize what we have there. Our ongoing operations expansion is $233,000, and it's just spread across the entire operation of the city. The expansions are like this, and I'll go through each one of them, but they're all designed to enhance our productivity and our ability to do things more efficiently. The software that broadcasts this meeting has an annual subscription rate. We're putting back into the budget a tuition reimbursement as people take college courses that benefit them in the performance of their job. The city has a system of reimbursing them for that. For the first time, we have always had money built in the budget to send people to training here and there. For the first time, we're setting aside some money to bring people in here, because there's always a group of people you really can't send them away for some training, and it's easier to bring somebody here and pull them off the job for a few hours. So that's what the 30,000 is. We'll see what that amount is like and adjust it accordingly down the road. There's a judicial review committee has recommended some changes in the indigent defense, and so we're plugging some more money in when that contract needs to be renegotiated. The council has asked Development Services to expand the area that they notice developments, and so they've requested an additional $12,000 for that. The opinion sampling software, again, a subscription fee. And this next one is going to be very, very nice. It's to have our city code in an online service so it's searchable by word, and it will save our staff a tremendous amount of time that they can just put in the keyword and there it is. And we're excited about that. That's going to be a huge, huge time saver for us.
Is that accessible to the public as well?
Mr. Bell. It's online.
It's online, so anyone can look it up instead of calling in.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, some additional ones. This next one, a police citation software module. Right now, the officer has to input the data. That is, again, hand put into the court software, at which we have to use their software. This module takes the data the officers put in and directly downloads it. So it saves most of one employee's time, who can now go and give some more time, I believe it's to evidence. So that's a big time saver, as well as an accuracy enhancer, because every time you have fingers on keyboards, the opportunity for mistakes is significant. Just ask anyone that has to proofread my stuff. The next three items are set-asides that we hope will be in the budget every year for equipment that just naturally rolls over. Instead of having big amounts of money going in, we'll just set it aside, and as needed, they'll buy stretchers, they'll buy new cardiac monitors, and the Murdoch Canal Trail maintenance is going to be a little something there. It's only our portion of the trail, but this is assessment the county gives us. Okay, facility upgrade.
So Richard, excuse me.
Yes.
So that isn't what we are planning to spend. That is what the county.
That's what the county's given.
Assessing us.
Yes.
And they do the work?
They're going to do, I believe it's a seal coat this coming year.
So is it expected that that will be an annual expense?
We're putting it in as such, if they'll need 45 each year, we're building that in as if it will be.
If I may, Mayor, when we collectively worked with the county to build this trail system, one of the contingencies was the county would own it and operate it, and we would help defray costs of maintenance. And so this is just us following through with that commitment we made.
So do we have any say as to how much they spend or don't spend?
You know, I think they do present, the county does present to us, I think it actually will come through MAG, and so there will be an accounting to the county. And to date, this is the trail's been operational now for 3-4 years, and this is the first essentially assessment that we've had. So I do think they have been prudent in the way they've managed
So it actually may not be 45 per year.
It could be 100 in 1 year.
Right.
And then we could go 2 or 3 years and with any maintenance requirements.
Okay.
But if we set it aside,
that's fine.
Those bump years won't phase us. Okay, the facility upgrades, even though the building is old, and we'll talk about the future in one of the studies, if the roof leaks, the roof is leaking. If we need to fix some piping, we need to fix it. So those kinds of things are built in our budget. We have several facilities, and we have to keep them up as best we can. Now, the Fleet Maintenance Fund, their overall personnel is slightly over $400,000, and their operating budget is a little over $250,000. And they take care of the fleet. Now, the fleet that's built into the budget, which really comes out of the majority of it comes out of the general fund. 21 new vehicles, and they are the full range of vehicles, but $765,000 from the general fund for this aspect. Each enterprise fund pays for their own, but combined, that's $750,000. And we set aside $150,000 for fire apparatus. And that can be used if there's a need in a given year, but we set it aside and collect money to replace the engines because they're just outrageously expensive. In IT, they have personnel's 1.2. You know that we do much of our own programming in-house, and so the staff is larger than you would expect, but it's because we design our programs in-house. Operating budget of a little over $700,000, capital this year of $77,000, and between the operating budget and the capital, they come up with their upgrades just under $280,000, but it's servers, desktops, laptops, and miscellaneous printers and things of that nature. In this day and age, you know, it used to be when I started working a little over 30 years ago, if the power was out, after a while people say, I can't work. Now they say, if the server's down, well, I can't work. And that's true. You can't. We are just there, and I had a summer job decades ago where the power went out. It was a grocery store. I was a bagger. And what the baggers did, we hopped up on top of the cash registers and cranked a handle. And we had a special on ice cream and frozen foods at that time. So get it out of the store.
I haven't seen a handle for a long time.
It's, well, you know, you have to go back. It's way in the last century. Road fund revenue, and this is money that comes from gas tax. So every time you fill your car up, there's some money that eventually makes its way back to the city of Orem. And this is built upon road mileage and our population.
So we've increased by $500,000 due to the new law that the legislature passed last year.
And
Member McDonald.
Thank you. Is the gas tax rate a flat dollar and not a percentage? So as the overall price of gasoline is going down, are we staying the same?
It's a certain
flat per gallon.
Cents per gallon.
We follow it down.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lentz.
So last year with Proposition 1, there was a lot of talk about how short are we on our road funding, and do we have, if we make this adjustment to $3.015 million, how short are we compared to where we would like to be when it comes to maintaining and upgrading roads?
I can't give you a figure, but I know we missed the mark of where we ought to be by a considerable amount.
I think we were looking at about, at 2.5, we're at 50% of what we needed. And then we also had 1.7 that we wanted to put in for new projects. So that would have been like 6.7, and we're at 3.
You know, from this, some CIP money comes over for the major road projects. And what this does, and the council adopted a philosophy that we would use the gas tax money to do the maintenance. Because if you stay on top of road maintenance, you lengthen the life of a road. You can almost double it if you stay on top of a scheduled maintenance. And by doing that, you save probably over the course of 2 or 3 generations, you would save tens, if not $100 million in costs that just because of putting the money into maintaining it versus waiting till it has to be rebuilt.
Mayor?
I'm sorry, Jamie?
Just maybe just anecdotally to Councilmember Lentz's question, you recall several weeks ago we talked with you about some capital projects that we recommended were important things that we moved forward with. One of them was essentially a rebuild of 1200 West from 800 North to 1600 North. That project alone, this is not expansion of lanes, so we're not adding additional capacity to the road, just merely fixing what's there. The estimated cost of just that effort right there is $1.6 million. So we do have a long ways to go. Chris Shirkey, our Public Works Director, and his team every year put together a State of the Streets report, and that information will provide additional detail, as well as our capital projects, 5-year capital plan that we provided to you earlier in the year also includes some specific information about road projects that we need to tackle. This summer, we'll actually overlay and do work on Center Street again. So we've been doing pipe projects, utility projects this year, and I think we'll begin after July 1. We'll begin the overlay of Center Street from essentially State Street to about 10th West, and that's $1 million project alone too. So we've got some big roads that have big numbers tied to them, and we're just trying to just incrementally tackle them based on our resources. And the money that Richard is talking about here tied to road maintenance is not for a lot of those big road projects. It's more slurry seals, microsurfacing, crack sealing. We're just upping our game in those areas so that we can maintain the integrity of our current street system and hopefully not have to rebuild these roads at a frequency that is going to make it cost prohibitive for us.
We, I think we are woefully underfunded. And to that point, at the MAG meeting on Thursday, a major point of discussion was on roads, on funding from the legislature. One of the legislative sponsors of a bill last session was there. We had UDOT there. It's a concern to all the cities. So
yes. As Mr. Davison was mentioning, we dedicate this money to the maintenance, crack sealing, a slurry seal that goes on, and it's stuff that really does add to where we go. We have a microsurfacing program and then street overlays, as you can see. It takes a lot of money to do that, and if you do the previous maintenance things, you can defer an overlay for quite a while. Okay, our water fund, we have an excellent water system, and the revenues are growing. As you know, last meeting you adopted a water master plan and gave instructions to staff to develop a tiered rate structure that would meet the needs of this master plan, as well as meet the needs of a brand new state law that would have gone into effect today, where we have to develop a tiered water rate system that is designed to encourage conservation. I mean, we live on the edge of a desert, and if you live in St. George, you live in a desert. So, you know, it's probably needed, and they are working on that and hope to be able to bring it back on the 24th of May for your consideration, but got to make sure there are no unintended consequences in this.
So these numbers do not reflect?
They do not reflect. They reflect what we have the capability to do today. Okay, so the capital projects that were passed on that you would have expected are not here because we don't have a rate structure that could their personnel just under $2.2 million. Operations is huge because they buy a lot of water, and that is where a huge amount of money goes. Capital program just barely over $1 million, and you will see that going up considerably with the new rate structure. Their improvements, they want to go from 2-inch to 4-inch lines. That helps with fire protection, and this is the area that they want to be focusing on the coming years. 6th West, 640 West, 4th to 7th North-ish area. That's where they'll be going, and they ultimately will replace all the 2-inch lines, and so that we can have improved firefighting and fire flows. Now, water reclamation, okay, everybody who wants a chance to win something to eat, pay attention. It's coming up. Personnel, a little bit less. Operations, fairly decent in there. Again, they buy a lot of power and natural gas to run the plant. And
Richard, while you're going through this, we have revenues and transfers, but we also have surplus on these funds. And I know that some residents look at that and say, well, let's use that surplus. Why is the surplus there? And it might be $700,000. What is the reason for the surplus?
The surplus is if we have an earthquake, you need some operating cash to rebuild a system that will be damaged. Also, you have the issues of, the council's direction is pay as you go. So in order to build these large projects, you have to accumulate the cash just like you would at home. You have to save up, and then you pay cash for it. And some of the project will take a couple of years of setting a significant chunk of money aside, and that will, we'll set it aside. It gets invested in very safe, very liquid assets that get just dynamite returns of 1%. So we look at that and don't plan on paying much on the interest earnings, but that's why we have reserves. For one thing, any emergencies that come along, you have to have the cash to pay for it, and pay for capital projects without going into debt. You have to have cash, and you set it aside. So
And the capital projects are expensive.
oh yes, everything you do on this level is expensive. Just is. Okay. Now, there's a picture on the screen, and it's from a fairly old TV show. We're talking about water reclamation. What is the significance, or particularly one of those two gentlemen, for water reclamation? Anyone
question.
here?
Sorry.
His
Anybody
job.
Answer?
He works in the sewers, right?
Who?
Jackie Gleason.
Oh, the
bus driver. It's,
That's true.
Conrad. What's his name? No.
Okay, I'll admit, this is a tough one, and I didn't think the high school kids were going to get this one. But who's the guy that had a job that's fitting with the sewer?
Carney?
Art Carney.
Carney.
Dang.
Oh, someone in the back.
Who was it? Who
That
was
was
that?
Danil.
I said the last name first.
Tie goes to the.
That's okay. Give it to me.
Okay, it goes up here.
Can't take.
Councilmember Lentz had a comment. Did you have a comment?
So I actually, as we were talking about the possibility of a natural disaster, if there was a capital fix that needed to be made promptly, I know a lot of our programs are self-insured. So with these enterprise funds, do those fall into that category of things that are self-insured, where if there was an earthquake, we can't just call up our insurance companies? So we would have to.
We do have some earthquake coverage, speaking of that specifically, but it has a cap, and we have a significant deductible we would have to make.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would also share it with a couple of other cities. So if we were hit harder than, say, Spanish Fork, we would get the lion's share of that. But, it's like dental insurance.
Your premiums
pay
would
you
go up
here, and that's it. And after you meet your deductible, so there's a window that we could collect some money. And then if it's severe enough, FEMA, of course, comes in. But that's they don't pay up front. We have to be able to cash flow it, and then we're reimbursed.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Okay, the water reclamation projects, there's some routine liner projects which instead of replacing a line, you can, in essence, put a sleeve through it, and again, it expands the length of it. And they're going to put a 4-inch lateral in a cemetery. For the first time, they will be connected to the system. And then some maintenance elimination projects.
Councilmember McDonald has a comment.
Could you go back to that last slide? And this may be a better question for Chris Shirkey. When you put in a liner, what percentage of the flow do you lose? Like a 6-inch pipe becomes a 5.5-inch pipe? How much do we lose when we stick a liner in that? And I assume we don't need to tear up roads as much. Could you talk a little bit about that, please, Chris?
So you're correct in that the inside diameter does decrease. However, it's been determined also that the material that we use for this increases the smoothness as well. And so in some cases, we'll have an increase in capacity, even though the pipe size diameter is reduced a small amount.
Okay.
All right. And then your next question was regarding
to dig up roads. How do you physically?
Correct. Okay, so we're not actually putting a sleeve in per se, but we are putting a liner in. It's a sock that has a resin. It's blown up in the line itself. It has steam and pressure. It's pressurized. And then it forms along the walls of the pipe itself after it's been cleaned. And after that's cured, then it's in place. We don't have to dig up the roads at all. We can go from one manhole to the next and then make some modifications to the inside of the manhole and the trough to make a smooth transition.
Thank you.
Yep.
So while we're discussing this, how much money do you save by lining an old worn out pipe versus putting in a brand new one?
Around 70 cents on the dollar, so about 70% altogether.
And that's what's being done throughout the U.S.
Correct, yes. Wherever it's, you can do that, then we would do that. If we have a line, for example, where we've had a failure and we have had a settlement in the line, then we'd have to excavate that, fix that, and then we could line it.
But those that are applicable, they're doing it
Correct.
through the U.S.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. In fact, in some cases, they are doing this with culinary water systems as well. But that is much more challenging and not as cost effective.
Right. Thank you. Okay, Richard.
Okay, our stormwater fund is next. Their fee, it was increased in the month of April. It's got a schedule that it would go up, but right now it's gone up to $1 from what it was to start this current fiscal year. And they will be using that for some projects. Their personnel costs, just slightly over $750,000. Operations are $1 million larger than that. And capital is $1.3 million that they're putting in there. Of the 1.3, the projects take just slightly over $1 million, and the rest is in fleet replacement. But stormwater projects, they have two large ones on 4th North, heading towards west, and then they're going around UVU. They have another significant project. Mentioned the strategic studies. They are actually going to be funded in this year's budget out of reserves, and that will come up in the next budget amendment that comes up in June. But these studies, due to their nature, they will impact and direct the way the city goes for the foreseeable future. So one is an overview of what our fees are. Are we collecting as much, recouping our costs as much as possible? Are we charging things in line with existing laws and our own policies? Make sure, it's good to do that every once in a while, just kind of make sure you're centered and grounded. The rec center, trying to keep it as viable as possible and find out what the proper space utilization and layout should be, and get an architectural plan for how that could be remodeled down the road. Geneva Road Master Plan, particularly the area that the Zion's economic study they did for us, they termed it the wedge. What can we do with that wonderful asset of the city, going down the road? How do we wish to see it develop?
So, Richard, is that strictly a study that we're funding? Anybody else interested in it?
We're the loan funding agency right now.
So it is, and it's coming out of reserves that came out of excess building fees, et cetera.
Sure.
Analyze what to do with this complex. We have the court building. The juvenile court will be moving out. The state doesn't want the building in a few years in the future. What do we do here? This building has some, doesn't meet current earthquake standards. It's got some space issues. And, what do we do? What's the best thing to do? You pass the State Street plan, and then there's some nodes with some various districts along State Street. What kind of standards are going to be there? And that'll be addressed in the coming year. Now, our debt service fund, this is the fund where we pay general obligation debts and debts that are backed by fees and revenue sources that are in the general fund. So here's what the projected budget is coming in. A fair amount of that does come from other, like we have some franchise tax bonds and et cetera, and they funnel through there and get paid out of this fund. But principal amount for this coming year is 3.4, interest just under $500,000. Then we have another $3 million that we funnel through here. Overall, our outstanding bond indebtedness citywide, you can see the declining trend, just under 44 million and dropping. When an opportunity to refund a bond comes along, we take advantage of it. We're looking at one right now where we'd be refunding it, getting a better interest rate on it. And
So, Richard, this includes the general obligation, the revenues, the enterprise revenue comes up for next year around 44 million. That does not include Utopia, what we need to pay. So I noticed that our payments are 3.9 million this next year on this outstanding debt.
On the general fund
yeah.
type.
Right.
Yeah, the various payments for the utilities, they stay with them.
Yes. And then the Utopia payment is 2.9.
Yeah.
Or
Well, it's
maybe
very-
3.0.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Another question on the debt issue, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
So in addition to going from 61 down to $44 million that shows on your slide there, we also, part of that 44 was refinanced, is that correct? Roughly 10 million was refinanced at a lower rate?
Most everything has been refinanced at one time or another.
I'm just talking in the last 3 years, from 13 to 16.
Yeah, road bonds were refinanced. We've done some water in the near term. 2 or 3 years ago, we did a big water.
So it'd be lovely if a local publication, perhaps a newspaper, would advertise to the world how well we've done in reducing debt.
If you know one.
I'll try to look around. Thank you.
There might be a friend of yours in the back there. Okay.
The Recreation Fund, this is a fund that, the portion of recreation that is handled by the Recreation Fund is the rec center itself and the Sierra Pool Complex. That is taken care of. Out here, what you see out here, baseball, basketball, softball, that's funnels through the general fund. And so what you're seeing here are the revenues that come in to run the two facilities that I mentioned. If you notice that the appropriation of surplus is zero, because they're down to the point there's not going to be any. And so what fills the void there is the transfer in coming out of the general fund. Personnel, just under 1.3 million. Operations, slightly over $700,000. And then, we have all kinds of events. People go swimming in inappropriate attire, but what can we do? Oops, sorry, went fast. The wastewater or the solid waste fund revenue stream just is going up this year due to growth. The rates are going to stay the same as they were last year, and that's what we got. Take a close look at that. The picture on the screen, it probably looks a little bit funny, and if you can identify why, you'll win something.
They're all models.
They're model. There you go.
No fair.
No fair. The guy with glasses gets it.
Losers always not fair.
Hey, did I get mine?
You would
I don't think you did. I'm pretty sure you didn't.
I didn't want the baby.
Oh, he's...
Jamie.
Okay, solid waste is purely a contract. And by the way, Sanders won West Virginia. Just popped up on my screen here, in case you were wondering. I know it's bated breath here. Our hauling contract is $1.8 million. Transfer station fees of roughly $800,000. And then we give out coupons for people to dispose of things. Just under $150,000 of that gets redeemed. The Take Pride in Orem projects are another couple of $100,000, and then we have some miscellaneous expenses in there that pick up some other parts of it. We run our own purchasing system and warehouse where people can go down and pick up commonly used supplies, and they're the one area that's using $50,000 of surplus because they no longer need it. But a couple, 4 or 5 employees in this area, and operations is very small. We are self-insured to a great extent, and we give a lot of internal focus with the staff to to take care. Personnel is fairly small in this area. Operations is very large because we have some premiums we pay. We are self-insured for workers' compensation for the first $600,000 per claim. So essentially, we're self-insured. Hence the focus on risk management so that we will have people do things right the first time. And we try to motivate them or scare them.
Member Lentz.
I understand that as a city, we've made significant strides in the area of risk management, and that has made it so that we can essentially self-insure much more affordably as well. Could you speak to that?
Yes.
Well?
We've cut our number of claims in workers' compensation area. Off the top of my head, it's not coming, but it is roughly a fourth to a third of what it traditionally was. And then the dollar value per claim is down significantly. Trouble with workers' comp, you can get hurt in this year, and fees from that injury can accrue over a number of years, as it takes time to get the employee back as much as you can get them back. Some you can't, and some will have costs that go on the rest of their life. And as I see the reports of who's gone through, I recognize names have been retired for a number of years, but they were hurt on the job, and they have ongoing issues from that injury. But from that, we just had to look at what, if we were to buy insurance on the public marketplace, we're saving, I want to say, $150,000 a year if we keep up our current trend. So it's worth the risk exposure we have. We've only hit that one time with just a tragic injury. And now with that individual, we're at the point where if any ongoing needs are, we get a check to reimburse us from it. So
our experience rate and our modification rate has come down.
Our E-mod is called, your experience modification is called the E-mod rate, has come down. This year they changed some of the rules of how it's calculated, and then nationwide the E-mod is going up, so we saw it creep up a little bit. But we have made dramatic strides in getting people focused on this.
And I think one of the reasons for that is that we've put personnel in place and put safety procedures in place and meetings, monthly meetings, discussions, a much better safety program than we had in the past.
Jason Addison is our risk manager, and he is ideally suited for it. His personality is perfect for this kind of a job. He connects with individuals very readily, and he came out of public works. So he has this, hey, I've done the work, I know what you do, and he has a lot street cred. He's got street cred here. So, yeah. Community development, you just held a public hearing for CDBG, and the types of things that you look at. This is what we built in the budget that can get amended according to what their final allocation is and the projects that they send out. Now, the rest of this is going through with some recommended fees and charges changes, starting with passports, small fee increases, passport photos going up $3. Overnight fee increase covers costs.
So, Richard, I don't mean to belabor the point, but seems like we have a lot of people that come here for a passport.
We do.
And I'm just wondering, it looks like we compare favorably against other ways to get a passport.
I think we're the best place to come get one. Don't need an appointment.
I see them lined up at the door sometimes.
Yeah, they're very, very efficient. And I had somebody who, when they found out where I worked, they had just received their passport. And they said, would you tell the lady that's there? And the lady's Bev, and I don't know Bev's last name. Burdette. She was so kind, and she walked us through so efficiently and made sure we knew everything. When I passed that on, I was told that, I'm one of several who've relayed that Bev is great to work with, and she primarily takes charge of that. So we do it. We bring in, I want to say, 65,000. $65,000 a year in this. It's a lot at $26 a pop. Okay, next, fees and charges, business licenses, tweaking this a little bit. Trivia question, name the movie. Hey, who was that?
I didn't hear his answer.
Napoleon Dynamite. A picture for that movie may come up later on. They're changing a little bit on how the business license fees are allocated. The overall is going to be net neutral for us. The business setup fee, new business setup fees being changed a little bit, as you can see, and commercial base fees going from 30 flat to 0, and the revenue comes in other ways. Fence modification. This isn't if you and I are putting up a fence in our yard. This is if someone is like a commercial area where they have to put in a specific type of fence and they don't want to. They want to put in, instead of masonry, maybe they want to do wrought iron or something, but they want to change it somehow, and the fee to cover the costs of processing that. As you can see, subdivision plat slightly changed, temporary site plan, a little bit of change. Stop me at any time. Now, as large complexes,
I think we're prepared to present all the fees to you, but are there particular fees that you're concerned about? We can continue to go through them unless you're comfortable with what you've seen in the budget to this point.
Any comments from the council? Yes, Councilor Miller.
On that last screen, you went from 100 to 500. What's the difference for the fence modification waiver, and why the high jump?
There's a fair amount of work, and Mr. Bell can add to this in processing it, and it seems to me it comes to the council.
Yes, we're getting more of them.
So this is strictly labor time? Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to see all the fees, but I would maybe like to see you expedite it without having to explain everything.
So you want the quick version?
The quick version, but I'd like to see it.
All right. Okay, now this one, when you have unfinished complexes, if they can pay $375 per building plus an additional $30 per unit, if there's some work that needs to be completed that doesn't make it unlivable, but they can still tidy it up and let them start opening it up.
Your picture was Napoleon Dynamite, by the way.
Well, yeah, it's listed.
I know.
That's not fair. That's why
I'm just
trivia one.
That's right. He can have my candy.
You can have my Baby Ruth.
After hours, particularly with capital projects, we have people come and ask, hey, can you get somebody out here so they can move their project along, and there's a fee that is assessed with that. Street light fixtures, as their costs go up, they're adjusted accordingly. Again, more streetlight fixtures, trenching that they need to do, and the costs get based upon the type of light we're looking at. And again, some trenching costs going up, and this one is, it's a $100 increase on that. Fees and charges. Here's our next trivia question. The bottom right group of people. Hands.
Butch Cassidy.
Which one, Butch Cassidy?
One on the far right, on the bottom.
This one?
Yep.
And which one is Sundance Kid?
I don't know.
One in the middle.
Now, Debbie said, I am not sure on this one.
Could I have the other one there, Brandon?
I think it's one with the mustache.
Or it could be that guy. I'm not sure. I was looking for someone that looked the most like Robert.
I didn't get mine. Arnie. As per Pugmar.
Boy, we're gone now. There may be something down the road. And it would be something that the group would do. Yeah. So, library fees, some very slight changes with them. Again, some more library fees. 25% cleanable markings in a page increase that's on here. If you damage the fly page, I didn't know what one was, so I Googled it, and this is what came up. That's a fly page in a book. Damage it, it's $350. If you lose a cassette or a CD pouch or whatever, you see the fee changes here, very, very slight on that. Loose pamphlet material, this your fees, what they're going to be.
8-track tape.
If you lose a Tyvek envelope, it's going to cost you $1, or you could go bring one in. Okay, I think that might be less than $1 for you. Police reports, slight change on them. A new fee for video. If someone, now that they have body cameras, if you go in and request a video, an officer, someone's going to have to go in and make sure what's on the video is what you want and isn't going to get in the way of someone's privacy. An example, a few years ago, my home was burglarized, and the officer came out, went through the entire house to make sure we were okay, and no one else was hiding and or holding someone hostage. Had they had a body cam, someone could go and request that video and see everything in my house. And I would be very uncomfortable with that. And I'm sure most people would feel the same way, or typical traffic stops, you know. If you get pulled over, you don't necessarily want your neighbors going and getting the video to see how you reacted. Those type of things, you know, I'm not sure how it all settles out. But as we come through...
Sorry, one question on that. Are there legal exceptions to that where they might be able to apply for a waiver to that request?
I am sure there are.
Yes, there are some privacy provisions that have been set forth in state law. So there are circumstances where they would not be released.
Well, and not just to protect privacy and things, but if somebody had a legal requirement where they needed to request a video for some reason, can they apply for a waiver to that $40?
Oh, the 45.
Oh.
I'm not sure what the scenario would be, but
I don't know.
There are provisions in state law under government records where you can make application for a waiver, but typically we have not waived fees as it relates to police reports and videos and things like that.
And I know it does take a lot of work for them to go through the video and clean it up and prepare it, but I'm not trying to say that that's not justified. I'm just wondering if there are circumstances. But
Does the state dictate any fee structure for this type of stuff at this point yet? It's all based on costs associated with...
If anything were to get out of hand, then I'm sure they would. As a rule of thumb, you don't want your fee to exceed the cost of delivering whatever service it is that you're doing.
Okay.
With the amount of money that we budget for, we will produce over 5,900 police reports in the coming year. Traffic accidents, everybody comes in. All those things. Insurance companies are huge requesters.
It's a little more than 100 a week, isn't it? Quite a bit.
Yeah. Okay, cemetery lot, there's a change in if you're transferring it from a resident to resident or non-resident to non-resident, a new fee of $15 to transfer that right. Existing in there is if it's a resident to a non-resident is $300 fee that's already there. Reason it's there is a significant change of $300 between burying a non-resident or a resident because it's in the general fund and that's where the money comes from. Okay, water base rate, we talked about the last 25% hike that's attached to Jordanelle, and that's on the 3/4 inch meter, and proportional according to AWWA, American Water Works Association. They have, based upon meter size, which defines the amount of water that can come into a home.
And that happens to all communities that are hooked up over at Jordanelle.
Yes, and so it goes up proportionally with that. Any questions on that one? Okay, rec center, some fee changes. They're slight. It's been 3 years since any of these changed. Moving into, we'll come up with one here in a second on some fees, but pavilion rate up to $50 per block. Their passes for if we have one rate if your business is located in Orem, and one rate if it's located out. So, for example, Timpanogos Hospital if they bought rec passes for their employees, it would be a lower rate than Utah Valley. Again, it comes out of the rec fund. A fair amount of money gets put into the recreation fund from the general fund. So it's recognizing you're here, you're paying your way, and someone on the outside is not. Again, just more of the passes. It's depending upon the size of the group that's coming in, they get different rates. Now, this first one, the top line, the $75 per hour, as charter schools become more and more prevalent, and or anyone that wants to come in and use the gymnasium, and without vying with the rest of the public, they can get it for $75 an hour. And you see the other fees are along the same line, except for the locker key replacement, and it's there. But people come in and want racquetball courts for other things than racquetball, and there's a fee now for the first time. And if you want to...
Richard, just to clarify that last one, so they can play racquetball in the racquetball court without having...
Just like you do now.
Right, okay.
But if you want to use it for something else, or if you want to rent out a lane, like Jamie said, if I wanted to rent a lane in the pool, it cost me $15 an hour, and I pointed out he can't swim for an hour. Tom probably can, but he couldn't. So then he could sublet it, and by the end of the hour, he's probably made money. So...
Can I buy that every time I go to have my own lane?
You just go ahead and we'll make a fortune off of you. Other fees and charges coming through here. Any question on the group rates here? And youth have a different group rate than adults. If you set up automatic payments, there's a $40 one-time fee. That's the end. Okay, had we had any candy left? This was the last one. And if you were watching TV, what sound would you be hearing right now? Ooh, 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 ooh. Okay, that's it. Here's what's, after you've taken any comment, what you want to do, ask any questions. We have to, by law, present the tentative budget to you by the first meeting of May, which is today. And then the actual state law says you will tentatively adopt the tentative budget, but you can do it with confidence if you want. You don't have to be tentative in it. And then set the public hearing for June 14th at 6 p.m. And that's when the regular public hearing you're accustomed to will take place. And right now, any changes you want to make between now and then, it's kind of like open season on it.
So, thank you, Richard and Brandon. Appreciate it. Appreciate the good work you do on it. It's a large document. So, Jamie, as far as what you were saying, the public hearing on the tentative budget is what was passed.
So you'd need to open it up for a public hearing.
Right. I was just bringing up the fact that it is on the tentative budget.
Correct.
What they brought up.
Correct.
Okay. Councilmember Lentz?
So I don't want to place the blame for this on the staff, because I think this primarily rests with the council, where in our retreat we identified our two primary goals for the year are to figure out how to resolve or address Utopia, and second, to figure out what our plan is for the city center complex. And as I looked through the budget, there wasn't really a lot there. And in fact, with Utopia, it seems like we're actually taking steps backward, where before we had about $480,000 a year budgeted for our operating expense assessment, which UAA, to be fair, is no longer assessing to the city. But I feel like if we're now taking that back out of the budget and placing it into other things, we might say that that's our priority, but our actions might indicate otherwise. If we say that's what we want to do, but our budget doesn't really have any allowance for that. So I'd be comfortable accepting this as a tentative budget for now, realizing that we as a council, we need to provide the input necessary so that we can work that. What is our actual plan on those two things? If those are our top two goals for the year, what are we going to do to accomplish them?
Okay. We'd like to go ahead and open this up to the public for a public hearing. Anyone who wishes to make a comment, please do so. Hold your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name and address.
John Reinhardt, Daniel Drive in Orem. I'm very glad to see that it includes 3 new police officer budget. And I would be really happy to see even more budget for police officers. And this, I guess, maybe even for more future budgets, but I myself wouldn't be opposed to increase in my taxes if I knew that they were going to go to more police officers. I wouldn't be sad to see more fees increased when we have population growth we've been planning for. Also go that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? If not, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion of this and bring it back to the council. One thing that I wanted to bring up is that not only are we hiring some additional policemen, but we're also purchasing additional police cars, a considerable amount of money going that direction. And we're also doing things with the fire department as well with new devices and things that are needed. So I think it's interesting that our budget has $5 million additional dollars in it from sales tax versus what we had in I think 2010. And when you have that leeway, it allows you to do things that otherwise you couldn't do. And our city is growing. I think the last census I looked at, it was 94,000. And so we need additional police. We need additional vehicles to serve the public that are the residents of this city. So I appreciate what the budget is. To me, it's also interesting that this is a balanced budget. So the state balances their budget, the city balances their budget. Not to get too far out of line here, I wish the federal government would balance their budget. Councilmember Spencer.
So I have a question, Richard. Really, it's to Chief Giles. So when we did the Citizens Academy, went up to the firing range, and they mentioned that the officers only get to practice X amount of times because they don't have enough ammo. So the question is, do you have more? Did you put that in the budget for this year?
I feel that we have plenty in the budget right now. I have plenty to be able to.
For the ammo?
For the ammo, yes.
Okay, because that was a concern. They said that.
But I don't know how that exactly came up, but as far as the ammo budget that we have plenty right now.
And because they have to certify each year?
Yes, we certify twice a year.
Twice a year.
We also have firearms training throughout the year. In addition to that, we're going to actually have some simulation training in Provo now that won't even necessarily need ammunition. But as far as this year and what's in the budget for next year, I feel that we have sufficient.
Okay, thank you. And then also I have a question on the Timpanogos storytelling fund. Is it run in a negative? Trying to find it now.
Which page? So the budget is not that. If it was, that's when you would see an appropriation of surplus that would indicate that we are intending to run that in the negative for that year.
I'm just looking at the revenues. Your estimated actual 15-16 was 306, but your expenditures were 380.
Yes, and then so the last few years they have been using their surplus. I believe for the last 2 or 3 years, in that regard. And a lot of that is because it's donation driven. And so they don't necessarily, they plan to use those surpluses that they have for those purposes in order to maintain a certain level and maintain that from year to year.
Okay, and then that also doesn't show, where does it show the maintenance and the setup and all that stuff for the employees for the tents and all that stuff? Is that in the park, recreation or parks?
Well, if it was city employees who are doing certain things, then that just is borne by those departments.
Their home department.
Yeah, just it's part of their regular cost.
May I clarify, David?
Sure.
When they rent those big tents up there, that's not paid through this budget at all.
It is. Yeah.
The storytelling
Actual
budget.
rents of those items are.
I thought the
in
storytelling group had a separate budget outside of the cities.
I believe they do pay for some of their own funds, own items as well.
I think it would be helpful to invite Charlene up to kind of speak to the relationship and the accounting and what we have responsibility for and what the Timpanogos Storytelling Institute has responsibility for as it relates to the Storytelling Festival.
They do have their own budget, but we'll turn the time over to Shar.
Yes, we operate the festival in a partnership with Timpanogos Storytelling Institute. They became a separate organization a few years ago. Prior to that, it was more loosely volunteer-based, although they've always had significant commitment towards the project. We do operate all of the bill paying, invoicing, purchase orders, contracts through the City of Orem because we have set that up as the legal entity. We have also defined our roles. We work primarily on the facilities, and they do more of the programming, hosting, hospitality, those kinds of differentiating assignments. We are working on a more formalized agreement that we have never actually had, and legal has been working on a draft of that. The festival itself has pretty much been carrying its load on donations and ticket sales and merchandise sales. There have been other activities that together we have tried to bring into a more balanced budget. Things that have been maybe a drain on that fund or that budget in the past, like a conference. We have not had as good of luck with attendance at a conference. We are also working with Timpanogos Storytelling Institute to bring in additional grants. They do the vast majority of grant writing for our joint storytelling endeavors, but we, as the fiduciary agent, have essentially receipted those grants and then made the payments accordingly. The grant efforts do really help us to layer different opportunities. For example, if a grant is paying to bring a storyteller to Utah, we wouldn't necessarily have to stand that expenditure from the fund or donations or ticket sales or things like that. We do contract with, as Councilman Spencer noted, the tent companies and other places, and we adjusted ticket prices a little bit to try and anticipate some of those. It is still a very family-friendly ticket price. But we could provide additional information, but that has normally been handled through the city's accounting and purchasing, and the library staff provides support on that paying, and then there are quite a number of soft costs that are absorbed by parks, police, other kinds of services.
So where's that slush fund in the budget?
141 is the Timpanogos Storytelling area. It starts on...
Yeah, well...
So you would have to look at the CAFR because the budget does not reflect a balance sheet.
Okay.
It's purely revenues and expenditures. So if you look at the CAFR, you can see that their fund balance.
All right, thank you.
So if I may, Mayor, too, I think when we look at this fund, particularly, there's a fund balance there, and there is a board that oversees these monies in cooperation with the city and the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival. Obviously, Shar has mentioned we serve as a fiduciary, but there are conscious decisions made to pull money out of the fund in excess of, for example, revenues generated. So conscious decisions are made to spend more than what they will be pulling in revenue in certain years. In the same way, for example, we consciously choose in some of our enterprise funds that we're going to pull more money out, for example, to complete a capital project than we're actually putting into the system in a given year. So that give and take happens on an annual basis, and the oversight is based on the board that we have that governs this fund in cooperation with the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival, the city, and ultimately with you as a city council. Because we serve as a fiduciary.
I was just under the impression that it was, it did better than it's doing, I guess. That was...
Well, for example, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the festival several years ago. And the board in cooperation with TSI, consciously said, we're going to spend more money than we're going to pull in revenue because we want to make sure this is kind of a flagship marquee 25th year experience. So they consciously went into that festival knowing that expenditures were going to exceed revenues, but they also knew that they had this money available in fund balance to cover those additional costs. So that was a conscious policy decision that they made to have expenditures exceed revenue. In the same way we sometimes make conscious decisions to spend more than we have in current fiscal year budget based on fund balance that has accumulated over the years to build a water project or to replace a digester down at the wastewater plant or whatever we do down at the recreation center.
So a question I have, and I love the Storytelling Festival, but we're running these funds through the city and have for many years. The Storytelling Institute is a 501c3, I believe. Do we have access to their books, to their financial statements, to the records of what happens each year in the Storytelling Festival? The reason I ask that is because where we're so closely tied and where they're putting money in and taking money out, it would seem that if we're that closely working together, we should have access to see from the Institute what is occurring on Storytelling Festival throughout the year and the festival itself as to where things are.
We have full access to the expenditures and revenue of the Storytelling Festival and other secondary storytelling events. The only expenditures that we don't regulate as the city would be related to the 2 staff members that work for Timpanogos Storytelling Institute and whatever their office expenditures are.
So could we...
Correct, funded separately.
So could we get a copy of that and see how that plays out, what the expenses are, what the revenues are, and what that looks like?
Certainly.
And just for Brandon, Fund 70, this fund is audited in cooperation with all the other funds of the city on an annual basis too, correct?
Correct.
So there's a check in terms of the board and these expenditures that take place, as well as the city's audit process that we go through every year, and this fund is specifically included like any of our other funds in the city.
I would just like to see a copy and get a copy of that.
Certainly.
Okay.
If I may too, I'm sorry, Mayor, but this kind of speaks to one of the concerns that we have as staff is trying to better define the relationship between TSI and the city of Orem and who does what. It has been the source of conversation and to a certain degree frustration on the part of both sides because we're faced with, as a government agency, requirements under the Utah Fiscal Procedures Act, certain things that we have to do to remain compliant. And sometimes that comes to the frustration of TSI that says, well, this relationship in some ways actually is placing more of a roadblock, for example, in our path. A good case in point is we're required to invest the surplus money that we have in this fund. We invest it in the state treasurer's pool that garners, what, 0.5%? Okay, so 1%. That's a frustration to the Timpanogos storytelling folks, and they say, we could take that money, we could invest it elsewhere, it could generate, 2-3 times that. We'd be much better off, yet we're kind of faced with this constriction that we have to invest this money in the state treasurer's pool. And so we've been having conversations probably the last 9 months to 12 months as to how we can better define this relationship and provide them greater autonomy to do some things that they want to do while at the same time protecting the interests of the city. We've actually even reached out to the state auditor to help us try and figure this relationship out. And the state auditor has said, yeah, we're not really that interested in pursuing it. Good luck. So this is something that we're consciously talking about. We're wanting to develop a relationship agreement so that we can better define that relationship and at the same time provide them flexibility while providing us the protection we need, because obviously as a fiduciary, we're very conscious and mindful of these assets and want to make sure that our interests are protected in the same way the TSI wants to ensure that they have an opportunity to do with these funds what they deem appropriate as well.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Chair. Any other comments from the council? Councilmember Larray.
Usually for rainy day funds, you have to have at least 5% in state law, but we usually have a lot more. Do we have a target of how much percentage we want to put away?
15%.
15? Okay, thank you.
And we're meeting that target.
We're meeting, okay.
We're meeting that, and we're over, and that's why we have a surplus. If there's no other comments, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion. I'd like to move that by resolution that the City Council adopt the fiscal year 2016-17 tentative budget and set a public hearing to adopt the final budget on June 10th, 2016 at 6 p.m. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Councilmember Spencer.
Aye.
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 Okay, the resolution passes. Do we have any communication items, Jamie?
It's necessary for us to go into RDA and the street light.
All right, I have that ready to go.
Okay, just as it relates to areas of just communication items, all of you are invited to participate in the UVU baseball game that is upcoming this Friday evening. If you're looking for tickets for you and for those that you'd like to have accompany you, if you could just get with Stephen after the meeting and he can set you up with some tickets and give you some additional information as it relates to the game. And Councilmember McDonald, you can go early and warm up to make. We haven't gotten the feedback from the mayor if you made it across the plate.
So, yes, I did make it across the plate, but it was a little wide to the right. Interestingly enough, when I left after the first inning, it was 5-0.
For the Wolverines or the Cougars?
No, for BYU. So we'll see how the game ends up.
And then just, I reached out to you, remember, a couple of weeks ago about an opportunity to sit down and talk about council goals. Unfortunately, not all of you are able to participate next Tuesday, so I'll be sending out a notice to you tomorrow again to try and land on another date that you can come together for that discussion.
Okay, would someone like to give me a motion to adjourn to a meeting of the Redevelopment Agency of the City of Orem?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Okay. We want to call to order the Redevelopment Agency of the City of Orem. The first part of business is to approve the minutes of the Redevelopment Agency meeting of December 8th, 2015. I believe that was in your packets. Do I have a motion? Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the Redevelopment Agency meeting of December 8th, 2015. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Our scheduled items, the first one is a resolution adopting the Redevelopment Agency of the City of Orem fiscal year 2016-17 tentative budget. Richard Manning and Brandon Nelson are our presenters, and we'll turn the time over to them.
And Mayor, I would also suggest and recommend that we make this a public hearing as well in the interest of caution.
Thank you. So we will begin just a brief overview. The existing RDA areas that are listed here, all but one have expired. So the only item revenues that are coming in from those areas are related to the outstanding debt that was issued to do the. I think they were primarily parks in those areas. The only area remaining that still has a regular tax increment related to it is Project 9008, which is also soon expiring. So most of the revenues that are associated with each one of those areas are based on this current year, because this is the current year that they have all of them except that one have expired. And we are estimating through next year. Those estimations are very difficult. We talked, Richard mentioned the property tax rates being set for our regular property tax rate. We also have that same issue in relation to the RDA. And so many of the revenues here are best guesses as to what will be brought in from those particular areas. Also impacting that are obviously if there are assessments that have not been paid, property taxes have not been paid, and so we end up getting those revenues in a future period based on how the county is able to collect on those.
Do we have any surplus in our RDAs?
Every one of the RDA areas has some level of surplus.
Is there a way to tell us what that is?
I don't know those off the top of my head.
Okay.
Well, if I may, Mayor, there are a number of RDAs where there are millions of dollars available, and a majority, there's actually two specifically, those along the Parkway, 8503A and 8503B are probably the largest. 8503A, which is down in the Walmart area, has the largest balance, and I think that's in excess of $4 million.
It's B.
Is B that is?
And it has approximate, from what I just remember, it's around 5 million.
And then the other one has 2 plus?
2 million something.
And all the other ones have, anything from, $80,000 to $100,000 to I think $500,000 in
something
one of them.
And then are we under legal obligation to expend that money by a certain time period? And if so, do you know what that is?
There's actually no sunset provision. So all of these RDAs were created prior to 1993. Was it 93 or 92? Where they overhauled the RDA law. So there is less definition tied to these RDAs than there is today, but there are no real sunset provisions tied to when the money can be spent. However, obviously, we would assume that that money was collected specifically for those areas, and any expenditure of that money would need to have a nexus to those particular areas. At the same time, over the course of a number of years, we made contributions. We paid for projects from the general fund that could or should have been actually paid out of the RDA. And so we're actually going through a process and working with Ryan and Lewis Young. We've gone through a process whereby we've identified those particular projects, and we do have opportunities to reimburse the general fund for costs that the general fund made that could have been paid through the RDA. And so there is some of that shifting that can go on.
Very substantial, or?
Well, for example, it's those type of arrangements that are going to allow us to, for example, build the turn pocket on 400 South and State Street, the Councilmember Sumner Memorial Turn Pocket. That will be one of the projects. Some of the discussion we've been having about 12th West and some of the improvements that we need to make to accommodate a particular tenant that is planning to locate approximately 1200 North. That is some of the money that we would use to help defray some of those costs. That's a situation where we have an economic development need, but it's not within a designated RDA area, and so therefore we would try and facilitate one of those reimbursements. This is a much larger conversation,
sure,
but we're looking to using that remaining money on a couple of key projects in the area, and they just haven't come to the point of absolute definition yet where we're ready to start essentially formally acting upon these things. And you're familiar with some of what we've talked about along improvements that we've been discussing along the Parkway, as well as even potential property purchases that could benefit the city long term. Those are projects that could be facilitated through the RDA.
I felt it important that this discussion be had in this meeting, so it's on record, and that we're, as a council, aware of that, so I'm aware of it, but
Yeah.
thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead. Anything else?
Okay, so just, on the screen, you see the associated expenditures budgeted for each of the RDA areas. As I mentioned, primarily the remaining budgeted funds are for the debt service component related to the 2002 sales tax and its various refundings since that point. And so the two main components are, the majority is for that, and then there is also an administrative fee also in there. So as you look in the budget for each page, each odd page, which begins each expenditure area, and that's, how do you go back? So, and just so you know, here's the remaining related debt associated with the RDA. Just so you can see how that plays out from year to year. We talked about some of those surplus funds, and some of those surplus funds, as obviously as we reach near the end of this debt service, some of those funds will actually need to be used. There will not be as much RDA revenues coming in to cover the debt for that particular period. And so some of those surplus funds are being identified so that we make sure we have enough money to cover that debt when it comes.
So in this study, you're looking at both sides then?
Correct.
Do you show a map on these RDAs like you've done in the past?
Yes. So in each of the pages, the odd pages show you the expenditures. You can see that in most of those, the bottom line, the contributions to other funds, those contributions are for those bond payment, to make those bond payments. On the right-hand page is a synopsis of each redevelopment area. It gives you a map, gives you the date it started, shows you the increase, which I think is very important, shows you the increase in the value from that RDA.
So to that point, I think there's 3 of them where the value is tenfold what it was 30 years ago. And I think 2 of them are triple.
Yeah, 8501 in and of itself was valued at $1.5 million, is now currently worth $125 million.
Okay, so 100 times.
8503, I believe both of the 8503A and B were relatively significant.
The one thing I would like to bring out, which I've said many times before, but when you look at where these pockets are, where these RDAs were, and you look at where we were in 1985, it's interesting. You know, we had a peat bog down where U.S. Synthetics is. We had an orchard, which I love orchards, but we had an orchard up where the technology park is. On State Street, where Macy's is, we did not have that kind of improvements. What was it then?
Trailer park.
Trailer park, okay, thank you. And it's just really interesting to me that these have all turned out extremely well. They've been huge benefits for the city. They're presently large areas of retail sales and commerce and business facilities. And, I'd just like to say that I think all of them are a huge success. You look at the car dealerships, you look at University Parkway. I commend those people who took that effort back in 1985 to do those RDAs, because they have come to great fruition.
I had someone call, and I think I remember who it is, but I don't want to say the name in case I didn't remember right. But they called, they had questions about it, and I was hired on when RDAs were just, it was like war. And the city was vilified for them. And the call came in and said, hey, I just want some data on it. And I supplied the data, and the same person called back a few days later and said, I looked at that. This wasn't an expense. This was an investment that this made, that they're reaping huge amount of benefit. And you think beyond the taxable dollars that come in, you think of the jobs that were created and that still exist, and they will continue to evolve over time. That's where the true benefit comes, is how it enriches people's lives.
Right, the jobs, and then also how much sales tax are we reaping every year, year in, year out, and will for many years in the future from these particular areas. And I think your comment is right. It is an investment. And you could have looked at it as an expense and said, no, we don't want to do it back then. The reality was it's an investment in the future of Orem, and it's been a huge, I think, foundational blocks for our community in different parts. So, Councilmember McDonald.
If I read your property tax issue correctly, though, our property taxes aren't going up from this because of the frozen. Can you explain that to us?
Okay, with the haircut amount, when an RDA is set up, the city initially gets all of the increment, and then every few years it steps down. And so we go from 100 to 90 to 75, and don't hold me on the percentages, but we work our way down, and the difference between 100%, say 60%, that 40% increment, that goes to the schools, the county, and the mosquito district, and everyone else. There was a provision that is no longer available that opened through a date in 2001 where you could claim, and they called it a haircut, and go back and the city could recoup up to the 100% for recreational projects. So we built a number of park projects, 12 as I recall. There's some new ball diamonds out here, the new Sierra Pool, Mount Timpanogos Park, the skate park, Nielsen's Grove. We doubled our acreage in parks, and by doing that, then the money came back from, say, the school district or the county, and we get to claim it for the life of the debt, which you can see goes through 2023, and then it all goes to where it would go, and we'd get 15% of it at that point in time.
Okay.
Mayor, one final thing I just want to mention, because in the past it's come up with participation agreements related to the RDA. And on page 17, and I'm not sure what page it is in the PDF file, but there's a page that lists the remaining participation agreement related to there, and there is only one remaining, and that's at the Mazda dealership. And it terminates in 2018, so the year after this, that agreement also ends.
Okay. It's been requested that this become a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Anyone who would like to speak, please keep their comments to 3 minutes and give us their name and address. Seeing as how no one is coming forward, we'll go ahead and close that, bring it back to the council. Any other comments from the council? Councilmember LeRae.
I'm actually was an economic development director for the city of American Fork, and I think the general public doesn't really understand the great tool that this really is, whether it's a CDA, an EDA, an RDA. So I think maybe we need to educate the public better on how this is a great tool, and look at the investment that you can make in a community. And they kind of have a bad name, like you're picking a winner or a loser, but it's not true. It's not true, and so it's just a great tool. I think it's great that the state law allows us to have this in our toolbox, and in the right situations, it makes great sense. Whether it's job creation, whether it's increasing value, it makes sense if it's a blighted area, whatever. So it's a great tool, and I just encourage that we educate the public on the value of this. I know we were just touring the mall at the CDA, and that's going to be a great project, and I think in the end, we're going to see that as a great investment also. So I just wanted to echo the mayor's, how it's been a good thing for Orem, how it's improved, and it's in the right circumstance, it's a wonderful tool. So,
thank you for that comment, and I just want to say I support what you just said. And when you go through the mall and you look what's happening, I mean, it's huge for our community, and I see stores and facilities around the mall that haven't been rented, that are now renting, that are improving their facilities. And, one thing that we brought out when we were having open houses about the CDA is that over a 40-year period, over $90 million will go to the Alpine School District, and that will be huge. And then the ripple effect at the mall from a $500 million investment will be $2.5 billion in our community. So you just can't overstate what a great benefit this has been to our community, and again, in the right circumstance.
Just some business names that come to mind that they were able to settle in an RDA, and they didn't get benefit themselves, but they had space that they could build a business in. Omniture, which now is bought out by Adobe. Blendtech, US Synthetic, in the day WordPerfect, which changed the face of Orem. I'm sure there are others that I just can't think of right now, but it has been a great place, to build a home for businesses to launch. And many have stayed and, employ a lot of people. And as, economies evolve, they will continue to evolve, and we will forever have the asset that it exists.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further comments, anyone would like to make a motion?
I'll make it, Mayor.
Okay.
So I'd recommend that we tentatively adopt the fiscal year 2016-2017 budget as set forth here on this day for the RDA.
Okay. I'll second that.
Need to set a public hearing.
I'm sorry?
Set the public hearing.
And set the public hearing for June 14th of 2016.
6:10 p.m.
6:10 p.m.
Okay. I'll second that. Councilmember LaRae?
Aye.
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 Okay, the resolution passes. We will now go ahead and adjourn to a meeting of the Special Service Lighting District of Orem.
So moved.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. One of those was a second in there, and the rest of us said aye. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, so I'd like to call to order the Special Service Lighting District of the City of Orem. We would like to begin by approving the minutes of the Special Service Lighting District meeting of May 26, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Okay. So we have a resolution to adopt the Special Service Lighting District, City of Orem, Utah, fiscal year 2016-17 tentative budget, and I believe our presenters are the same.
Okay. We just refer to it as street lighting, and once the budget's adopted, it no longer seems to exist as a separate entity with the city. We just go ahead and administer it like we do the rest of the budget. You can see where the fees come from. A significant amount of money comes in the street lighting fees, the $3 1/4 that each home pays, and it's an equivalent lighting unit for businesses, and is based upon 90 feet of frontage. So every complete 90 feet they have. So if they have 90, they get $325. They have 180, they get $750. And it goes on and so forth. If you have a corner piece, we don't bill you. We just take whichever side has the largest amount of frontage. That's what you get billed on. A little bit of interest earnings, some miscellaneous income. When this was adopted, part of the franchise fee goes towards street lighting, and
that's for the operation, correct?
And over time, Brandon has kept us pretty much on an even keel, so that we were doing what we said we would do with that. Their budget, they have a decent-sized operating budget with a couple of people are housed in there. They have some capital. This year, their big capital project is to buy the remaining Utah Power poles that are in the city. We get a more favorable rate, and then through process of time, we will put up our own lights in those areas. But, if you, over by Orem High School, the neighborhood that's just west of Orem High, that's it was a lighting district that was created back in the 90s, and Rocky Mountain Power had the poles that's long since expired, and we will eventually take those poles out, but we're purchasing them from Rocky Mountain.
So, as I understand it, the $3.25 that we each pay, that is to pay for the purchase of the physical facility, the streetlights, as it were.
It's primarily gauged to the debt.
Right,
But
to the
the
debt.
debt purchase of
And then the franchise tax, that money which goes into the general fund, is the money that then comes back to the street lighting district to pay for the operation, the power, et cetera. Now, the $325 is going to come off, I think.
Our last payment is in December of 2018.
Okay. So at some point prior to that, I would love to have a discussion. I know there's been different thoughts and comments as to could that fee stay on? Could it be used to pay down Utopia debt? Could it be used to pay for additional streetlight facilities? But I think it would also be important that we had told the public that that fee would come off at the end of that debt period. And so if we were to look at it in some manner or form, I think we would need to come to a consensus on the council together with staff and then determine should it come off, could it be used for something else, et cetera. So I think it's worthy of a discussion prior to that time.
And the way the fee will come off, it didn't come on all at once. And so it'll come off neighborhood by neighborhood so that every neighborhood pays the same amount of time. So it'll come down like this. And originally the plan was, we knew we would have areas like over by Orem High School that we wouldn't have been able to put up poles, our own poles and lights. But we would have a continuing stream of revenue after the debt, and we would dedicate that to doing it. That was the original plan. But we'll see where we get there. We have a year and a half.
And the operation of the lights is still an ongoing thing. So that franchise tax through the general fund needs to be brought into the special lighting district to pay for that operation.
And there's a good argument that there will still need to be some sort of a fee that helps make sure the operations are completely covered.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
No,
Okay.
This is the end of their budget.
Okay.
It's a long one.
All right, so we will open this up to a public hearing and invite anyone who would like to speak to please do so and keep their comments to 3 minutes and give us their name and address. I know we're missing a few people to do this, but anyway.
The best prize is still to come.
Seeing that no one is coming forward, we'll go ahead and close this portion and bring it back to the council. Any other comments from the council? Okay, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, Mayor.
Okay.
I guess it should be chairman, or what's your official title of this?
Chief Executive Officer.
Okay, Mr. Chief Executive Officer, I would move that by resolution we adopt fiscal year 2016-2017 tentative budget as set a public hearing to adopt the final budget on June 14th, 2016 at 6:20 p.m.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Spencer?
Aye.
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 Okay, the resolution passes. I would accept a motion to adjourn.
I got a question.
Yes.
On the tentative budget, in the print it says June 10th. Did we say June 10th or June 14th?
In the
Because it says June 10th here.
city council meeting.
I missed that. It's the 14th. May 10th is tentative.
This is June 10th.
Said June 10th, and we should
Okay.
have said June 14th.
Correct.
So we might want to correct the regular
Okay.
minutes.
I'd make that motion to change.
That's back in the regular city council meeting.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
All right, I don't see this, but
I just noticed it didn't make sense. It was 14th and 10th, but it's Friday the 10th.
So, Mayor, I would recommend that you reconvene back into city council meeting, make that correction, and then close the meeting.
so the correct date is the 14th, not the 10th.
Right. The 10th
Okay.
is Friday.
All right, so we will go ahead and adjourn from the Special Service Lighting District, which we've done. And we will call back into order the regular city council meeting. And I would take a motion to change the resolution that we adopted to the date being the correct date. Tom, do you want to do that?
Go ahead, David.
I'll make a motion that we change the tentative budget and set a public hearing to adopt the final budget on June 14th, not June 10th.
Second.